Well, hello everyone. This is a brief introductory video to how you can do the pendulum experiment at home. So I've got my setup here. What I opted to do, I've got some fishing line here, just a short piece because I've got a small setup here. Longer would be better for yours, so you have more options to change the length of this. I've got a protractor right here to measure some angles. And I've got my plumb bob mass. And so what I opted to do for that, I have, of course, lots of different options here at school, but I thought of something that I might conceivably have at home, or at least something like it. So what I opted to do was I'm going to use this balloon as sort of a bag to hold things, because what I have a bunch of are these small BBs. And so I'm going to use some of these. Now these BBs are super light. Adding 1 or 5 to this bag doesn't really make much of a difference in the mass. So what I decided to do is when I'm changing mass, I'm actually going to add 50 at a time. And even so, this is what 50 of those BBs look like. So it's still not very much, but for when I'm changing mass, I would add 50 at a time just to get something a little substantial. Adding 1 at a time isn't going to change very much. So in this experiment, I actually want you to perform 3 experiments. One of them, you'll be changing the mass on. So what that means is I have to be careful during that experiment to use the same length of my rope each time. I'm not going to change the length between measurements. I'm going to release this from the same angle each time. Maybe I can turn it like this so you can see it like that. And so it'll swing through the same arc each time. And the only thing I'm going to do then is change the number of BBs in here. And what I had said is, because of their small weight, I would add maybe 50 at a time. So my first measurement might be with 50, my second measurement with 100, my third measurement with 150, and so forth. And I want to do as many of those measurements as possible. And I want to stop at just 5. If I simply can't find, if I only had 250 BBs, then I'd stop at 5. But if I have, let's see, I have this has 6,000 BBs in it. I wouldn't go to 6,000, but I could go up to maybe do 12, 15 different measurements to get a good idea of it. I've got an experiment where I would be changing the string length. So I get this long length of string, and you'll notice I've got a couple knots tied in it. I've got a loop there, and I've got a loop at the end, and I've got a loop here. So this would allow me to put different parts of my string up and swing different amounts. If I put it at the top loop, then I'm swinging back and forth with the whole amount. If I put it at the next loop, I'm swinging with a much shorter string. And so I could put other loops along the way and get shorter and shorter and do my measurements there. I could find different lengths of string. That would be okay if you have access to that, and just use different lengths and tie them on. Be sure to measure the amount of string that's actually swinging for that measurement. So the experiment I'm going to do is, or the example one I'm going to do is actually the one that I set up in the document that I shared with you. So here is an image of it. See if I can make sure to get it. I'm going to be working in that yellow area. So I've already measured the length of my string. It's 45 centimeters. I did decide that instead of 20 BBs, I actually want to have 50 in there, just because of the mass of it, just so it's got a little more mass. And I'm going to do a quick experiment where I change the release angle. So I'll show you how I'll be measuring that, and then measure the period in seconds. And remember, the period is how long does it take for the mass to swing back and forth. So I actually need a second device here to measure the time. And I haven't done that on my iPad, so I am hopeful that I'll be able to find a clock here easy and get it. Stopwatch, okay? So iPad's got a stopwatch on it. That's going to be perfect. So I'm going to set this up. I've got my string here. I'm going to use that on my post. Now obviously I've got this post and I'm using it because it's convenient for my measurement. At home, you're going to very likely have something else that you're swinging your pendulum from. And that is totally up to you. I haven't gotten through all of the videos and other submissions from the other day, so my apologies for that. There's just a lot of work ahead of me right now. I decided that I could tie my string onto this, but then it'd be kind of hard to get it on and off, so I'm going to try using a paper clip. I'm going to paper clip these two things together, and I want to make sure that I do that as consistently between every two measurements as possible. So especially if I were changing mass, I'd have to get this clipped on in the same way each time. I'm going to put this through my bottom of my string. I'll move the camera here a little bit so you can see that. Okay, so now I've got my pendulum set up so it can swing back and forth. There. Okay, and I'm going to release it and let it swing. And what I want to do is swing from here to here, the whole way back and forth. That's going to be pretty tough to do just as I quickly release it. So I've got to be smart about this. I've got my clock set up beside me. But I have to do a bunch of things at once. I have to measure the angle that I release it at. And then I also have to hit the timer at the right place. I don't have enough hands. So what I'm going to do is actually let it go. And this isn't going to slow down much over the first few measurements. So instead of trying to hit it immediately upon release, I'm actually going to release it, let it go, get ready, and then hit start when it comes back to me. Even if I let it go too, it's not the end of the world. It'll still work well. Now the way to measure this is got to have my device straight up and down here, a little bit off. The angle that we measure for this is always how far do I pull it up. So in order to measure that, I'm going to put my protractor here, and then I'm going to pull the bob over, and this one would be 20 degrees. Okay, I'm going to release it from here, and then I'll get my stopwatch ready. The other thing I'm going to do that you'll notice is I'm not going to try and time one single period. I'm actually going to time 5 of them. And then I'm going to take the average of that. The reason for that is because if I'm trying to rely on my reflexes to get the beginning and the end, I'm going to be off a little bit. If I let it go 5 swings, I'm still going to be off a little bit, but by taking the average, by dividing that total amount of time by 5, that allows me to divide my error that I put in because of my reflexes by 5 as well. So it will help my measurement. I can measure the angle on either side, it doesn't matter. So since I'm on this side, I'm going to do it over here. I'm putting the center of my protractor right on the bottom of where I'm measuring. It would be okay to do it like this too if I knew I could hold it flat. It's just, it'll be easier for me to hold it straight up and down here. And I'm going to pull it back so it's at 20 degrees. And then I'm going to release it. And start. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and that was 8.40 seconds. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to put down the release angle of 20 degrees. And the period here was 8.4 seconds divided by 5. So I would divide that out. Ends up being 1.68 seconds. Okay, that was as easy as it was. I'm going to reset my timer. I'm going to do another measurement. This time I'm going to hold it at 30 degrees. Trying my best to make sure everything's level and lined up, and I'm going to let it go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and that was 8.32 seconds. So I come over here, my release angle was 30 degrees. I divide my 8.32 by 5 seconds. It's just a little bit less, 1.66 seconds. I'm going to keep doing this. I'll do one more on camera here. But I'm going to keep doing this with lots of measurements. Maybe I'd go up by every 5 degrees. That's it, 40. 1. Oh, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There. 8.34. Go back and put my data in. You get the picture. So I want to do as many of these measurements as I possibly can. We've got time to do it. So we're practicing doing science right, not doing it quickly. You'll do one experiment with a whole bunch of different angles without changing your string length or the mass. Then you'll do another experiment where you're changing the mass. So every time I would add 50 BBs, you might have something else for your weight, and that's fine. But I would keep the string length the same then, and I would keep the angle the same each time. And then the last one I would do is the string length. So that's where I'd be using either different lengths of string or tying knots at different points, getting shorter and shorter probably, and keep the mass of this the same and the angle the same. And so we're going to have lots of data from this. Take your time, email me questions or ask during our chats so that we can make sure to be doing it right.